You mentioned this. I just want to reiterate it. Where as far as the sellers don't need to sell because they've got all this equity in their home, and in addition to all the people that have lower than 4% interest on their mortgages, there's a lot that have no mortgage, a lot of equity in their homes.
Thank you for mentioning that. I didn't even mention that. Yeah, Sharon, thank you. Yeah, that's really good reminder. So about 24% of the country has rates at or below 3%, 65% of the country at or below 4%, 40% of the country no mortgage at all, free and clear. Now, how do any of these people get into distress and feel like they got to dump their home on a fire sale? Nobody feels that way. They feel like their house is too good a deal. Like they can't go buy another house and get a lower payment. They can't even go rent an apartment and get a lower payment. So they're just staying there. They're staying put. And if they,
a lot of seniors, they go, if I sell my house, I can't afford a new one, so.
Exactly. So they're just going to stay put and sit on the inventory. And until the inventory loosens, there's not going to be any significant doom or,
and you mentioned that the inventory is, it's increasing. And we're starting to see, and certainly our market here, a lot more seller concessions, because I think sellers are getting to the point where they're getting impatient. They want to sell. Yeah. And buyers are getting impatient because they want to buy a house. They want to get in it. So we're seeing, I'm seeing, I don't know if you are, talk to you, a little bit more tension in the market, a few more seller concessions. So to see, I just think it's a sign that we're going to start seeing more activity. I don't know if you agree with that, but.
Yeah, people have to be really careful when they look at the news and the headlines because sales activity is different than prices. Those are different things, right? There could be low activity and high prices or low prices and high activity. That can go both directions. It also depends, and I made the statement during the talk that all real estate is local, and that's true. But you really have to segment things in so many other ways, okay? Because you have to segment by price range, by housing style, obviously the geography. And so, when you say like the market here locally, I don't know what price range you're talking about, right? Like entry-level homes are just so undersupplied and so in demand that those are pretty easy to sell. But high-priced homes, and I've been shopping personally for my own home in the high-end market. And gosh, it feels great because there's tons of selection and the sellers seem like they actually want to work with you.
Yes.
So the agents, which is really refreshing, but they're not really giving these houses away either, and the thing you've got to remember is that Phoenix, like I said, I would now call the Phoenix Metro a cyclical market, whereas before I would have said it's a hybrid market. And, the prices went up so much here during the COVID era that they're just retrenching a little bit. It's not a big deal. This is not a crash. Too many people just overreact to everything. You got to remember, the housing inventory is still half of normal. It's still very low. And without it being high, remember, normal is only normal. That's a balanced market. It's not a bad market. If we get to normal, right? If inventory doubles and we get to normal, that's not going to be the end of the world either. There's about 140 million housing units in the country. Right now, there's about 760,000 for sale, half of 1%. There should be about 1% of the inventory for sale at any given time to be normal. So that's where we are. We're half of normal. One thing I want to say on the inventory numbers, don't read something and think, oh, Jason just misquoted the inventory. I didn't. There's different ways to look at inventory. It depends on the survey. Okay, I'm using the Altos data, and I like that because it's only active listings. The NAR, or National Association of Realtors inventory, uses active, pending, and contingent sales. So all three of those statuses, they call that inventory or available, and those aren't really available. So it's okay to use NAR or any other numbers, just as long as you compare it to the old NAR numbers. Apples to apples comparison along the way, year to year, you're okay. That's fine. It doesn't matter what survey you use, just be consistent about it. That's all. My favorite is single family homes, okay? Because they're simple, they're accessible, and they're not a business. I've owned 2 big apartment complexes and a few small ones, okay? And when I say big, I had a 125 unit complex here in Scottsdale before that I sold. Should have kept it probably, okay? But it seemed like a good deal at the time to sell it. Then I had another 139 unit complex, and I also have a 120 unit mobile home park. Okay. So I've got experience in all of this stuff, and I've invested with other people in other deals like syndications and so forth. Multifamily is a business. Okay. It's just like you said, Sharon, about wholesaling or fixing and flipping. It's a business. Say you own 20 single family homes. There is not going to be a Yelp page with your reviews anywhere. They're not going to be able to look up your house and see Google reviews and see 1 star and people complaining about it. Okay. When you own an apartment complex, you got a business. Okay. You're going to have a Yelp page, whether you like it or not. You're going to have Google reviews, and people are going to be complaining, and those tenants are going to be talking to each other.
Jason, I have never heard that brought up in all my years, and it's so true. It's true. So true. I love that.
You know why I thought of that is because I remember reading years ago a story about rent strikes. When those tenants live next to each other, they start talking. They make a Facebook group about your complex. Okay. And they start airing all their complaints in there. And, that sort of is like this negative spiral, right? It's like having a company and having someone that pollutes the environment with bad morale, right? It just happens. It's human nature, right? And so you're running a business. You can make lots of money in multifamily and single family and everything, right? With multifamily also, you don't get to diversify as easily because, we say be in at least 3 markets, but not more than 5, okay, around the country. And you're diversified geographically, but in the right asset class. With multifamily, you're obviously going to be more concentrated, so less diversification. But you can make money in anything. There's a zillion ways to make money in real estate, folks. Even the office market, right? Everybody would agree that the office market is terrible right now, right? It's post-COVID, the office market is just awful. People still make money in office space. They get a good deal, they rework it, and there's just all kinds of ways to make money all the time. But for me, simple single family homes, that's what I like the best.
I also want to address sometimes, you can invest in multifamily investments through syndications where you're not doing all the work and managing it. So that's also a way. And from that perspective, they're going to give you a pro forma and tell you what you should expect your cash on cash return and the ROI and what the projection is. But of course, you're not in control. You're just a passive investor on that. And you're going to want to look at past performance. You're going to want to look at the person doing the syndication to see if they've got the credibility that you need to rely on. So I'm going to comment on that, Jason.
Yeah, good points. I mean, look, people make money in syndications, but mostly the syndicators make all the money. Okay. So if you're at the top of the food chain, you're going to be better off most of the time because of the 3 things we talked about with commandment number 3, thou shalt maintain control. But it just depends where you are in your journey, how much money you have to invest, how much time you have to invest, and that varies for everybody. So everybody's situation is different.